चले जाओ यहाँ से, इस हवेली में शैतान का साया है। अमावस की रात को इसे अशुभ माना जाता है. No, I'm not possessed by a ghost from Ramsay film, but I would be talking to someone who grew up on them and has written extensively on Indian horror films despite the language barrier. I'm spooked and delighted to introduce my guest today, Tim Paxton. Tim, thank you for talking to ITV Gold in a special edition, Desi Halloween Special. You have a special love for Indian horror films. You've created horror artworks and written extensively for the horror magazines that you have produced and published in America. Tell me, how did it all begin? What made you explore the dark side?
Well, I grew up in a family that watched horror films. Uh, my mother, when she grew up in the 1930s in the U.S., she grew up on the classic Universal Frankenstein and Dracula movies. And so when she made sure that when I was old enough to watch these movies on television, she made sure I sat down and watched them with her. So I grew up just loving horror and especially monster movies. And
You've penned lengthy investigations into various subgenres such as Nagin cinema, goddess cinema, ghostly possession cinema. Tell me more about these.
I've, as well as horror films, I really like fantasy films, and especially Hindi devotional films. I always really liked. I grew up going to various Indian restaurants around where I live, and got hooked on some early comic books, like The Life of Krishna and
Oh.
Shiva comic books. So I got interested in the devotionals. And then when I discovered that there were sort of devotional horror films that started in the 90s, the first one being pretty much a Telugu movie called Amaru by Kodi Ramakrishna. That blew my mind. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like gods and goddesses, but there's like evil tantrics and ghosts and monsters all mixed into it. So for me, that was a perfect thing to watch. And then afterwards, I discovered that okay, I know about Noggins, snake devies, and then all of a sudden, I saw that Kodi Ramakrishna directed another one called Devi. It had Frima in it, and that again, like the other films, really opened my mind to the whole idea of various subgenres to horror, and of course ghostly possession films. That's the core element of majority of the Indian horror films. It's just ghosts everywhere, and they possess you. It's just to me, it's just a very unique cinema.
What made you write the filmography of Hindi director Kanti Shah and the film of actress Sapna Tanvir?
Uh, I like all cinema. It doesn't matter if it's an A grade cinema or a grade C. And Kanti Shaw is pretty much in the grade C bottom level stuff. But there are things about his movies that strike me as just very interesting. He seemed to do a lot with a very small budget. And of course, Sapna was in the films, and I thought she was actually pretty funny in a lot of them, and she's a pretty good dancer. But his films just attract me.
Have you seen Gunda? I think that's one
Oh
epic
yeah,
film.
yeah. That's like his big one, his first big one. That one, apparently, it didn't do well at the box office, but by
Oh,
word of
but
mouth, by
yeah,
the
there are a lot
time,
of people,
yeah.
trust me, who swear by it and they know the dialogues, from A to
Oh,
Z, everything about it.
it's one of the few films that of his that was actually subtitled in English.
Oh, okay.
That most of his films aren't, and I kind of have to really listen hard to understand. And again, because of the dialogue, because he likes the saucy, spicy dialogue with lots of double entendres in it, I was clueless. I had a really hard time following that. But I had a couple friends that would watch him with me and tell them, oh, this is very bad.
This is actually very cringy, very creepy,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
film buffs, they totally enjoy it.
Oh, I've sat through over 50 of his movies and movies that Sapna was in his or direct she was in other people's films. And they were just very entertaining. And his horror films are fun as well as his action movies.
Talk about some of his horror films.
Um, a lot of his horror films take place in basically a mansion, which is borrowed heavily from the Ramsey brothers' Piranha Mentir, where you have a ghost or a monster in a mansion terrorizing people. And he does it, but the way that Kantershaw films sets up his films is very much like watching a play on stage. The camera doesn't move very much. There's very little cutting back and forth for dramatic effect. You have to actually sit and watch the actors go through the entire scene, and hopefully they're not messing up. But it's he just has such energy in his movies.
You don't understand any of the Indian languages, but you've seen practically all Indian horror films with or without subtitles. Can you recall any horror cringy dialogue in Hindi?
Unfortunately, not very clearly, because the cringy stuff, like I said, has to do with double entendres and things like that, which okay, here's a scene from Verana. You have the ghost lures this gentleman back to her chateau so that she can possess him or kill him. And he is taking a bath for some reason in her house, and she comes through the door, and she's very seductive, and they just banter back and forth with very saucy language before he captures her. And so the language part, it's really tough for me to get. But if you've seen enough of the movies, you know what's happening throughout it. And I've watched a lot of other movies from different countries that didn't have subtitles either. And if you don't, I figure if you don't want to watch a movie because there are no subtitles or it's not dubbed into your language, you're going to be missing out on a lot of movies.
True.
And I do understand that dialogue is really important in Indian cinema to the audiences. And there's a lot of problems with people from different states not wanting to watch the other states' movies if they're not dubbed in Hindi or Tamil or Malayalam or any of those other languages.
Oh, trust me, like now it's like what is that, Pan-Asian film movement where everybody is watching other languages. So it's like the South Indian films have really come of age. And now if you see the Hindi box office, they're like bombing left, right, and center. But everybody is going and watching all these, Pushpa, RRR, all these amazing films, KGF, to name a few.
Yeah, it's interesting that prior to like 5 or 6 years ago, from what I've seen, there were very few Telugu titles and Tamil titles that broke through the box office, the Bollywood box office. But now they're all the ones that are raking in all the cash.
Yes.
And they've also gotten some releases in U.S. theaters.
Right.
Like KKK or RR is that's really popular over here.
Did you watch any of these films in the theaters?
Unfortunately, where I live, the theater that would show Indian movies is about 30 kilometers away. And I can't quite get to them. But I have seen some movies in the theater, some Indian films in the theater when I do it. And when I was in Bangalore a couple of years ago, I went to movies with friends of mine there, and Um, it was a pretty fun experience. The theaters are a bit louder. The audience is a
Hmm.
bit louder than they are in the US, where everybody's sitting there very quietly and watching the movie. There
Yeah.
seems to be a lot of cheering going on,
Hmm.
or raucous laughter with the Indian audience.
Hmm. So you've produced various film magazines, including the popular Monster magazine and also a horror movie show for the local public access cable station. We didn't really have internet or Google back then. How did you manage to create these horror wonders? Talk about your passion, your curiosity about the Desi bhoots or the Indian ghosts.
A lot of that started in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, by then, I had gotten out of college and I was writing about other films, which I can find information on very easily, like Hong Kong ghost movies,
Oh.
because there were a lot of Hong Kong horror videos at local grocery stores. But when I went out to look for Indian films on VHS, I found some Indian video stores. But when I asked about horror movies, they were totally shocked and they said Indians don't make horror films. And I was like very disappointed because I know there have been. I know there have been. And luckily, by that time there was a sort of a worldwide trading in bootleg VHS tapes.
Oh,
And I finally got my hand on a copy of Verana and I
wow.
watched it. And again, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know this world opened up to me. And
Hmm.
it took a long time to be able to find those movies.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of them I used to buy on VCDs.
Mm-hmm.
Those were really popular. Uh, and then I started writing about them because I was so happy to watch these movies, and I found that they were very interesting and my favorite country in the genre.
Hmm.
A lot of people in the U.S. did not know about them,
Mm-hmm.
so I basically decided, okay,
Hmm.
the films of Kanti Shaw have to be written about. These Noggin films, these goddess films,
Hmm.
ghost films that very few people, unless you're in the Indian diaspora, you don't know about these movies.
True. So, your latest project is about writing a booklet on the history of Indian horror films and shooting video instructions for a Blu ray box set of six of the Ramsay brothers monster movies from the 1980s. Talk about
Mhm.
that.
Um, I am doing a box set for a company called Mondo Macabro,
Mm-hmm.
and they had released some of these Ramsey movies back in the late 90s on DVD, and they have
Hmm.
long gone out of print.
Hmm.
But now they decided to release them as a Blu-ray box set, and they
Ah.
wanted somebody to write an introduction for them, and so
Hmm.
they contacted me. And I get in front of it, sort of like in the same setup I have here with this
Mm-hmm.
brick back, and I have the posters for everybody to see, and I talk about the movies, and I sort of give a background on various information
Mm-hmm.
that for about the movies and with Indian cinema in general.
Mm-hmm.
It's for a box set called Bollywood Nightmares,
Wow.
and we have yeah,
Hmm.
all the Ramsey movies
Hmm.
from the Ramsey brothers, including one of the newer ones from the director Deepak Ramsey called
Oh,
Atma that
okay.
came out in 2006, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So these are all high quality prints, remastered reels?
Oh, yeah, these are remastered from the ones we can get.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because a lot of producers just showed the movie once or twice, made all their money, and then they
Mm-hmm.
would put the negatives somewhere and forget about them. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the films deteriorated, but
Mm-hmm.
luckily, Mr. Deepak had some movies in
Mm-hmm.
good enough quality that Mondo Macabro would be able to release them on Blu-ray,
Very
and it's very
nice.
exciting. And I also had fun writing a booklet for the Blu-ray set about the history of Indian horror films.
When is this coming out?
Um, I believe the pre-order is coming out the beginning of November. People can pre-order the Blu-rays,
Very
but
exciting.
I'm not quite sure exactly when the box set is coming out. I believe it's early next year.
Okay. So, over decades, you've made friends and fans from India who dig horror films like you do. You've traveled to India several times. Talk about your experiences.
The first time I went to India, I was in 2018. I basically jumped on a plane and went to Delhi and landed sort of on the tarmac uh, running. I mean, I just really didn't know exactly what to do. Luckily, I was a friend of mine from Dehradun was able to set up uh, some railroad tickets for me, so I was able to get around at first. It was great. It was a lovely experience. In fact, so much I loved going to various temples as well, all over the country.
Oh, you went
From
to the
going,
temples. What about the haunted places?
so I went to one or two haunted places, especially this last year when I
Oh,
went. I was down in Kerala, and I went
oh.
to a few haunted sort of villages, or what they were is they were deserted factory villages, and there's supposed to be a lot of ghosts and stuff around there. But
Did
unfortunately,
you
we couldn't
see?
spend
Okay, you didn't see anyone? Did any
no.
communication?
No, I was hoped because I grew up a block away from our graveyard here in
Oh,
Ohio. And so I was ready to say, oh, there are going to be some ghosts. Maybe I can see some ghosts, but no ghosts.
oh, that's
I was a little
disappointing.
disappointed.
Yes.
Yes.
But you're currently
But,
living in Ohio, but you plan to
yes.
move to India in the near future and continue to
Yes.
watch and write about films. I would have guessed
Mhm.
you would perhaps want to learn black magic in India, but you want to study Shivaism and Shaktism. Explain
Yeah.
that, please.
Um, well, I mean, like I said, I grew up knowing about a lot of the Hindu pantheon. And my first favorite god was Hanuman, because I
Ah,
really like Hanuman. He was my sort of my spirit animal for Hinduism. And then I also knew a bit about Shiva and very interested in the female energy of the goddesses, especially the goddesses from southern part of India. A lot of the village goddesses. It is a that is sort of my interest when I get there. I would like to travel around to various places. And as far as black magic, there is a lot of magic in Kerala, in that whole area, as well as Assam and some other states, which I would like to visit. I'm maybe a little reluctant to try to, talk to a couple tantrics and see what they can teach me because you don't know what's going to happen.
true. Before we end this interview, list your top five Indian horror films that you would like to recommend to our audience.
Okay, well, for if you want to watch one of the first, I wouldn't call it a horror film, but one of the first sort of supernatural movies, there's a movie called Mahal from 1949. It's a Hindi movie.
Mahal.
Mahal, yes, thank
Yeah,
you. It's a pretty good movie.
it is.
It
It
deals a
is.
lot with interesting topics. And then later on, you can go into the Ramsey movies. My favorite Ramsey monster movie is from 1987. It's called Dak Bangla.
Which one?
And uh, Dak Bangla, Dak Bangla.
Bhoot Bangla or Dark
No,
Bangla?
wait,
Oh,
Dak Bangla.
Dark Bangla.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It is it is one of the only mummy movies that came out of India. And
Oh,
it's one of the films that's not I think it's underappreciated.
oh, okay.
And then another one you could probably find is called was Purana Mandir.
Purana Mandir.
Oh, from
I think that's my
1984.
all-time favorite, Purana Mandir.
Oh, I love that. I love that movie. And I did not know for the longest time that it was in 1984, it was in the top five grossing movies in India. It was a
Oh.
smash hit. Um, and after that, we have a movie called Rat.
Raat.
Rat.
Okay.
It's one of the first films by Ram Gopal Varma.
Oh, that one, Ram Gopal
Yeah,
Verma's
it came out.
Raat.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
and yeah, it came out in I believe 1993. Really good movie, kind of disturbing, but a good film.
Good film.
And then you have his Boot movie
Bhoot.
that came out. Boot that came out. That was really nice.
Yeah, Urmila.
Uh, and if you like sort of romantic ghost movies, you can always see 1920,
Oh,
the first one, which I really like because it's also a movie that deals with Hanuman as well in it. So I like that.
so you are on track with watching the latest horror movies also coming from India.
Yeah, like Tumbad.
Oh, you've seen that one. That's a
Oh, yeah, I
classic.
saw that one.
That would really go down in history.
Yeah, that was such a different movie. I was so used to a lot of the other Indian films up to then that was almost a return to the Ramses monster movie stuff rather than just a ghost. That's really good. There's another movie called Pari.
Okay.
It's really good. It's about the same year. I think it's 2017 or 2018.
Okay.
Oh, Stree is really fun.
Oh, you've seen Stree also. Great. And
Yeah,
Bhool
yeah.
Bhulaiya, I think the second one,
Oh,
Bhool
the
Bhulaiya.
comedy? Yeah,
Oh, yes.
I've seen I like the original film that it's based off of. It's the Malayalam movie.
Oh.
I can't remember the title of it. It's based off of that movie, which was one of the biggest hits in Kerala back when it was released. Massive hit.
Okay.
But yeah, I've seen that movie, the second one. The second one's pretty funny. The first one I liked. The second one's pretty funny.
So thank you so much, Tim, for talking to us
Sure.
and have a happy Desi Halloween.
Oh, thank you very much. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.